I arrived at Lisa's apartment for the first time as her spouse, rather than as a guest, with the assurance that stability, a man who would ensure the lights were on and the rent was paid, and who would never tread on her daughter Mia's toes, memories of the man she lost. I comprehended from the outset that Maya's devotion to her father's specter would they are consistently prioritized. I refrained from attempting to establish a place in her heart by invoking comparisons or constructing artificial scenarios. Affection. I simply determined to be present in the mornings when she awoke to ensure that her breakfast was prepared and her was compelled to wear a school uniform and assist her with algebra, or listen to her fury when assignments became overwhelming. Aspirations. For a period of 4 years, I organized all electricity bills under my name. Internet, Lisa's tuition courses, and Maya's private school tuition, in order to ensure that neither was any woman in my life ever concerned about receiving another overdue notice or late fee. Nevertheless, it appeared that respect was never a factor in anyone's accounting, and I soon discovered that spreadsheets and automatic payments are not translated into devotion. Maya's razor-sharp tongue was perpetually prepared to respond to any rule I attempted to establish, a curfew that appeared reasonable, hall passes during study hall, and the obligation to contact her home if she remained out beyond 9 o'clock. Each I braced myself for another disdain, and I rolled this evening, as if every action she was the sole individual who would determine who belonged in the world that her father had constructed, and parental concern was an intrusion. Adolescent Lisa dismissed my concerns as if I were an overprotective imbecile rather than a man, referring to them as moods. Attempting to establish a family. Until that evening, I endured disappointment on a daily basis. Friday was a typical day, and I entered a dimly illuminated driveway to retrieve Maya from a party where I had been assured that only a handful of friends would be present. She entered the vehicle with the aroma of inexpensive beer emanating from her nostrils. Her strides were unsteady, and her speech was slurred into Ani. Would never forget the accusation. I will never adore you. My father was superior to you in every way. The syllables collided with they struck me like a hammer to the chest, but they were not the dagger that I still felt writhing within my ribs. True blade later, when the mother of that daughter, the woman I had vowed to adore and protect, opted for indifference over protection, I discovered that evening that I was evaporating silence into our bed, as if I were reclining shoulder to shoulder with Lisa. Nothing had transpired. In an act of silent revolt, I turned my back. Rather than engaging in a gushy confrontation, I maintained my gaze on Thigh. Came to the realization that the loyalty I had acquired through bank statements and midnight dashes for cough syrup was unbreakable. Darkness. This is nothing in comparison to the betrayal of being dismissed with a flip of the finger and a half-asleep comment. Is that not the case? The truth. Lisa was persuaded that she would demand an apology on my behalf when I disclosed the precise words Maya had spoken. She only muttered, without glancing up, "Why are you surprised? Isn't that the truth?" and continued to scroll through her mobile device. That was the instant when a switch was flipped within me. Not a clamor or a demand, but a decision that was solidified in the frigid clarity of dawn. I resolved that if respect could not be acquired with every dollar I possessed, I would invest those resources in another location. The house felt distinct beneath my feet as I traversed each room the following morning. He entered the room in the manner of a spirit who had already vacated his body. Without any fanfare, I terminated Lisa's phone plan. Mia suspended all tuition payments, altered her Netflix password, and suspended her credit card privileges, thereby enhancing the radiance of Thigh would no longer be accountable for the television screen at that time. I observed that my absence was imperceptible. There is no photograph of a faded portrait of Maya with her father, and Lisa from a happier day is the only thing on the refrigerator that shows us together. I decline. You left a note on the kitchen counter. The only sound was the faint echo of my own pulse and the hum of an electric stove. When Lisa appeared in her robe and inquired as to why I was up so early, I responded with a curt assent and stated, "I have some matters to attend to," witnessing her perplexity transform into frustration as I proceeded past her without a glance. Back at business. That in the afternoon, I occupied the mahogany desk that I had acquired through promotions and late nights, and I contacted my attorney, Jared. Sloan requested a complete cessation of communication. No spousal support, no protracted fighting, no grudges were brought to court regarding domestic goods. I reserved a small hotel room on the side of the road that was sufficiently remote after the call ended. That betrayal would not befall me at midnight, but it would be sufficiently near that I could retrieve my bag and depart the following morning. Without neglecting the caffeine, I sent Lisa a text message, stating, "Please do not delay. We will discuss it tomorrow." She did not respond. That evening, the weight of 4 years began to slide off my shoulders as I watched the headlights blur past the rain-slicked window. Shoulders, one stratum of resentment at a time. I never could have envisaged that I would be able to assist with algebra homework, comfort Abrusadegos following breakups, and the cost of covering all expenses could be as low as a utility bill. Connected. However, I had grown weary of residing in a residence where every act of kindness was greeted with contempt and every sacrifice was assumed to be automatic. Consequently, I opted for clarity over confusion and silence over disputes, and I departed from the sole family I had ever known, in order to demonstrate that self-respect, in contrast to tuition checks, cannot be automatically financed. Standing at the threshold of our bedroom doorway, I recall the instant I resolved to speak up. The stale warmth of the night, which is still adhering to the sheets where Lisa is half asleep, is scrolling through her telephone. I perceived that my voice was more composed than it actually was, as if I were reciting a dialogue, rather than acknowledging the remarks my stepdaughter had directed at me. Maya stated that she will never adore me, I informed her, observing the reflection of the screen's glow in her irises. She stated that her father was superior to me. I anticipated that she would remain. She raised her head, shook her head, and shouted, but not from my mouth. Rather, she murmured without looking up, "Why are you as if dismissing my grievance?" He touched the screen and asked, surprised, "Isn't that the truth?" I could disregard the notification. At that moment, I came to the realization that I was an unpaid actor in the lives of two women. Refused to regard me as anything more than a mere convenience. My hands began to contract at my sides. The recollection of each unpaid the bill I had carried, the tuition checks, the grocery rounds, and the rent payments were intermingled with the pain of. I refrained from shouting. I refrained from pleading. I merely shut the door behind me. I and my heart joined together, as if I were enclosing the portion of myself that continued to believe that this marriage was a good one. Sanctuary. I lie beside Lisa in silence that evening, with my back to her and my eyes fixed on the sky. Darkness that appeared to be more candid than any conversation could be. I tallied the ceiling's defects, including the slight crack. The emptiness I had invited was recognized in the silence that accompanied the swirl of a long-drying water stain and the peeling of paint into my personal affairs. My emotions were not so much regret as they were the crystallization of my resolve into a force that is both formidable and impervious. The silence between us was thick with unspoken words, excuse, regret, and apology. Nevertheless, I declined to provide them. I declined to request absolution. Rather, I ingested for the first time in years. Freedom was realized, and it was realized that wrath can be a beacon as bright as love, and that sometimes the silent withdrawal is the most significant deed of self. As I began to drift toward slumber, it was my imagination that the bills I had composed were like invisible chains. Each dollar is a connection that ties me to a household that provided in return. I received nothing but contempt. I visualized the metal snapping back into emptiness as the links snapped one by one, until I was released from my shackles. The consistent rhythm of decision caused my chest to rise and fall. I would not squander any more time heartbeat earning loyalty that was not mine to command. As the first pale light of dawn stole across, I rose without ceremony, moving through the house with deliberate care. As I ascended the floorboards, the rooms were considered to be devoid of any life. Similar to an admission, there were no tokens of appreciation, no drawings that Maya had affixed to the fridge, and no photographs of our wedding day. On the kitchen island, the spaces that should have been filled with acknowledgement were only filled by my silence. I exhaled deeply and walked to the study, where the laptop was in slumber mode at the top of the desk that I had relocated to assist Lisa. Sessions that are conducted online. I logged in with trembling fingertips and modified each password. Email, bank accounts, and streaming services in order to preserve the evidence of my contributions. But no longer do they bear my name. Punishment was not administered. Clarity